Today's lesson is about the app economy, which I think is fascinating because think about how apps have changed your life. So they have probably changed how you date, they've changed how you travel. For me, they brought me meditation, which I never really expected. So yes, apps have changed our lives, and also there are fortunes to still be made in the app economy, and I am recording this for you at the end of December 2023. So Happy New Year! So the app economy today is worth about $500 billion. And this didn't even exist. The app economy didn't even exist before 2007, which I think is insane value creation. This is why the importance of the app economy and how it has transformed business cannot be underestimated. And this importance is set to grow. According to a research company called Statista, the total revenue in the app market is projected to grow at an annual growth rate of 9.59% in the next 4 years. So let's round that up to 10%, just for good numbers, for easy numbers. And let's project that with the projected economic growth, let's contrast that rather with the projected economic growth of the US, which is 2.4%, and the UK, which is 0.5%, so we won't even look at that. Thank you, Liz Truss. Anyway, so what I want you to see here is that not only is the app economy a massively growing market, it is actually set to grow 4 times the rate of the US economy. And the reason why I wanted to tell you about this now is that I think, I used to work on an emerging markets team way back in the day when I worked in finance in the City of London. Anyway, so what everybody wanted was to have emerging markets growth whilst actually having the home comforts of the Western world. And you know what? Literally, you can have this with the app economy, so please carry on listening. This is why I wanted to teach you about it today. So today's lesson is especially relevant for innovators, so basically founders or corporate innovators. It's relevant for investors because this is probably where you want to be investing, and for people who support the innovation economy. For example, if you are a lawyer or if you are a banker, there is opportunity for you in the app economy because there are going to be more deals, there's going to be more M&A, that means there's going to be more contract drafting and general and other professional services. And I'm a tech founder myself, so I ran a tech company. Yes, we did. One of our products was an app, and I found it really frustrating dealing with lawyers and accountants who essentially didn't speak tech and didn't understand what I was talking about. So this is why the app economy is an opportunity for people who want to make an app. That's a very kind of risky but exciting proposition, but also for professional services because this sector is going to grow. And if you understand what app developers, what app makers, or what the CTO or what the VCs who are funding these companies, what they are talking about, essentially you're much more likely to get that lucrative tech client. Okay, now that I've told you that they're really, really important, let's think about the apps that you use most. So for me, it's Gmail, it's WhatsApp, it's Instagram on a daily basis, and a few others. Out of all of these, it's only Gmail that came out on the Android device first. Everything else came out on the iPhone. And today I'm going to show you why this is, so you can understand how the Apple ecosystem differs from the Google ecosystem, which is on Android. And then you're going to understand how this affects business models. So first, let's define some basics. Let's have a reminder of the 2 ecosystems that we're dealing with. So an app ecosystem consists of 2 parts. Part 1 is the hardware, so the actual thing you are holding in your hand, and then the software. And the software is basically, that's the apps on your phone. The Apple system refers only to iPhones which run on the Apple system, which is iOS. So that's the software that Apple created. So if you want to launch your app on the iPhone, it has to be compliant with the iOS system, and we'll go into that a bit further on in this video. The Android system refers to all sorts of phones, from the Samsung Galaxy, which is actually quite expensive, to everything else that is basically not the iPhone. So from very expensive phones to really cheap phones. And the operating system, as in the software, it's created by Google. So you're already seeing the difference, right? In the Apple ecosystem, we have one player. That one player controls everything. They are God. So they control the hardware and they control the software. In the Android ecosystem, you have lots and lots and lots of players. So lots of companies make hardware, i.e. the phones, and they're united by one major player, Google, which makes the software for the ecosystem. And now let's just remember that Apple is a luxury brand. And what's really important for luxury brands? Control. Control is super important for luxury brands. So if you look at Louis Vuitton, or if you look at Krug Champagne, which is delicious, if you look at these companies, you will see that luxury companies very rarely outsource anything because they want to be responsible for the production. So, from dyeing the leather for the bags, to growing their own grapes for the champagne, to the manufacturing, to the marketing, and to the sales. So for luxury brands, control throughout everything is really important. And you know what? Control costs more. So let's see how this plays out in the Apple ecosystem. Think about the Apple ecosystem like a high-end department store. So like Neiman Marcus in New York, or Harrods in London, or Galeries Lafayette in Paris. When you go into one of these fancy department stores, you see that they have their own aesthetic and they've got their own rules. They're very selective about whom they allow to sell there. And they've got rules about how items should be displayed. So you're not going to walk into a Neiman Marcus and basically see a huge pile of clothes just lying there and people rummaging through. That's just not going to happen. So how does this relate to the Apple ecosystem? Well, if you want to make an app for the Apple App Store, which I have done, as I said in my previous company, then this app has to be coded in a programming language that is only compatible with Apple. So in effect, you're making a custom-made app for the Apple App Store. Also, when you release on Apple, you have to make sure that your app looks good on iPhones, and iPhones come in different sizes. So like any luxury brand, Apple is very concerned with how things look in their store. So they have design guidelines for your app, and if you don't follow them, then basically Apple is going to say, no thank you, we do not want you in our app store. So when you decide to release an app on the iPhone, you have to submit your app to the Apple team for review, like actual people. And the app has to be in the Apple compliant coding language. That coding language is called Swift. And the designs also have to be compliant with Apple's design guidelines. And they could still say no. Don't freak out though, because in my experience, if you actually do follow their guidelines, they rarely say no forever. So what often happens is that you submit an app, if they're unhappy with something, they will tell you what they want you to change. You change, you resubmit, and then you're going to be fine. But what I want you to see here is that they take control, they take image, they take their guidelines really, really seriously. It's like editorial control, or like that kind of control that you would get in a luxury department store, which just looks impeccable. So Apple just does not want ugly things or apps that are going to scam you in their ecosystem. And now let's go back to our luxury retail analogy. You know how in luxury department stores, there are stores within stores. So in Selfridges, in London, there is a Chanel boutique, one of my favorite places in the world. The Chanel boutique is like a mini Chanel store, which has its own aesthetic and its own stuff that are hired by Chanel, not by Selfridges. So you've got these two players, and there is a tension in this power dynamic because the retailer, they need the brand needs the retailer. But who needs each other more? Well, that's the question, right? So they have their own views on aesthetics, they have their views on who should be paying, like how much they should be paying, and so on and so forth. And this kind of power dynamic also actually plays out on the very popular, for very popular apps. So there have been battles between Epic Games and Apple, or actually you can see the battle that Mark Zuckerberg is always having with Apple's Tim Cook. So I'm not going to go into all of that, into those battles today, because then this would be a very, very long lesson, but I just want you to know that the luxury retail environment is very similar to the app ecosystem on Apple, but not on Android. So don't apply this luxury retail analogy to Android because that's going to be quite different. And now let's look at the business models. So who shops at luxury stores? I mean, this is a trick question. Rich people shop in the luxury stores. People who have money to spend because stuff in there is expensive. And this is the same for Apple. The median iPhone user earns $85,000 per year, which is 40% more than the median Android user, who has an income of $61,000. And that's according to Comscore. So how do you think this income disparity, so basically the rich people, if you want to target rich people, if you want to target fancy people, release on Apple. If you don't remember anything from this video, that's the thing I want you to remember. But anyway, how does this affect the business model? Well, if you are watching this on your iPhone, think about how many app subscriptions you have. I mean, I'll tell you, I've got loads. I've got Apple Music, I've got Headspace, the meditation app, I've got loads of health apps, I think Peloton, and just a bunch of other things. And you know what? I love them. I use them, I pay for them, I keep on paying for them. I love them. So on Apple, in general, apps monetize via subscription. This means that Apple users pay to use the apps that they're using. Just like in luxury brands, you don't need everybody to buy your product to be successful. And think about luxury brands. Does Chanel want everybody to have their bag? Or does Krug champagne expect everybody to drink their champagne? And a bottle of Krug starts at $200. No, like they do not want full market penetration. Those businesses can be super successful businesses with a fairly small clientele. Like they don't need huge numbers to be successful. And actually, this is also the case for subscription products. Headspace or Calm or Duolingo do not need everybody in the world to subscribe for them to have a really viable business model. And now let's talk about the Android ecosystem and what happens there. The Android ecosystem, it does not have the same level of control. It is not a luxury environment, so it does not have the same checks and balances. So it's more like a street market, but like not one of those fancy street markets where like you will buy a tiny slither of cheese for $40. No, I mean like a traditional street market. So it's more like that than a luxury store. If you submit your app to the Android system, it will not be vigorously checked like it will be on Apple. And this is why there are basically more dodgy apps that are out there to scam you on Android. So if you are an Android user, there are apps that are literally just scammy apps, so be careful. Android is a mass market environment and Apple is not. This means that more people use the Android ecosystem. And because it is a mass market, the users tend to be more price sensitive. So think about it, this is not the luxury store, so people are more price sensitive. And as a result of that, the business model has to be different, because most people in the Android ecosystem would not be able to pay for app subscriptions. But app developers, well, they gotta make money somehow. And you know, as a former app developer, I'm all for app developers making cash, right? So what do? They sell advertising. On Android, the vast majority of apps monetize via advertising, not subscription. So basically, just remember this, to sum up, Apple apps generally monetize via subscription, Android apps generally monetize via advertising. And think about, what do you need to have effective digital advertising? You know this. You need a lot of information about your users. You need to collect data. You need to collect lots and lots of personal data. This is why Android and Apple have such a different attitude to collecting your data. So you know how Apple literally advertises itself as a company that really takes care of your data? Like, have you seen those ads? I've seen them all over London and New York where Apple is literally saying we take care of your privacy. And this is an important differentiator for them. But I want you to know that this is not some moral value at Apple. This is driven by the business models of the apps in their ecosystem. That's the subscription model. If you're making money via subscriptions, you do not need to know as much about your users as when you're making money via advertising, because advertising is basically selling data in a form. This difference in business models is driven by the way the ecosystems are set up. And then the business models, they also influence the ecosystem too, so it's basically kind of a self-perpetuating circle. So the most premium apps go on Apple, and the Apple system basically gets more luxurious because it then becomes known as this is where the fancy people are. And Android app developers keep needing more data so they can sell advertising. So privacy can't really be a feature on Android. It's not really going to be a thing. So innovators and investors, you need to understand, if you're going to be investing in making apps, or if you're going to be investing in any kind of app innovation, you need to understand what kind of market are you targeting. Because if you're looking for higher income users, you need to release on Apple first, and that means that you're going to have to get specialists who are specialists in working on Apple. If you want to grow in middle income countries, for example like Turkey, you need to release on Android first, because if you went for Apple, you're going to be really limiting yourself. And the subscription versus advertising problem, it obviously doesn't apply to the big social media apps like Meta and TikTok. But these companies make more money from advertising on Apple because the audience is wealthier. This is why Instagram released on Apple first. So think about it. If you're going to be advertising, if you want to make money, which I suggest is a good thing, if you want to make money and you're going to be selling advertising, where do you think advertising is going to be more expensive? In the place where the rich people are, where they're going to buy expensive things, or in the place where the not rich people are? Okay, so this is why even advertising models basically perform. You can charge more for advertising on Apple, although there are now Apple privacy concerns. So yes, there are changes to this, but in general, even with privacy restrictions, this is still the case. Also, you might be thinking, well, today, Uber and Instagram and basically the popular apps, Tinder and so on, they're everywhere on Apple and on Android. And this makes sense because these apps are basically now trying to reach as many people as they can. But their priority was Apple, because that's where their biggest gains were going to be. And when you're starting something new, follow the money and go for the lowest hanging fruit. And then after you've done that, then go and do other things. So if you are a professional services provider, like a banker or a lawyer or an accountant, the more you understand what your clients are up to, the more you understand your client's growth strategy, the more useful you will be to them. An Android app is going to collect more data about its users. So if you're a lawyer making privacy policies, you definitely need to understand the commercial and technological case for why this is. And as your homework, because yes, we have homework over here, just look at the apps on your phone and think about how they monetize. Now that you understand the different ecosystems, you can understand how these ecosystems influence business models. And that is going to make you more insightful and capable of making better decisions in the digital age. The app economy has exploded and it has changed all of our lives. And from what I've told you today, I hope you see that it is going to keep on growing and growing and growing. And this is a huge opportunity for the innovators, for the investors, and for the service providers. And also I think it's a great opportunity for consumers to benefit from all of this innovation. This is the end of our lesson together, my dear smart person. If you found this video useful, I would absolutely love it if you just gave it a thumbs up and subscribed to the Tech for Non-Techies channel. Thank you for watching.